If you're trying to find out which self-development book you should be reading next, you're in the right place, because I put together this tier list. I'm going to be ranking these self-development books on a tier list from S to D. And S being the best, you must read it. It's life-changing. D being, it's kind of sucks. It's bad, in my opinion. And then after I rank them, I'm going to give a short synopsis of each book, what I thought they did well, what I thought they didn't. And so that way you know which books to read. On this list, I put together books that I feel are either very noteworthy that you should read, or they're very popular and everyone talks about them. So I'll give you my opinion on them. Are they good? We'll find out. Start with The Motivation Myth. So The Motivation Myth. This is actually a book I read recently, and I think it's completely life-changing. One of its core concepts is about how motivation is a myth. It's about how motivation is a result of action, not the other way around. So if you're trying to get motivated to do something, you don't get the motivation first. You start doing the thing, and then you'll feel motivated to continue to do it. So let's go to Power. Power is a must read in my opinion. And actually, after I read this book, I found out a few interesting things about it. But yeah, this book was actually outlawed in some countries, I found out after reading it. And because the concept is like, it teaches you how to persuade or completely control people, like psychologically speaking. And the reason it's outlawed is because it talks about a lot of the things that like Hitler did and all that stuff to get masses amount of people to follow behind him. It's a very powerful book. I think it's a must read, and I think it's a good skill to have if you're trying to get someone to do something that is actually beneficial to them. The only reason it's a must read and not a life-changing is because half the book, in my opinion, is not, there's a lot of fluff. Like, there's a lot of stuff in this book that is not really that interesting. You don't really need to hear it. The book could be 50% smaller. So The One Thing. Okay, so I recently made a video on this one thing. This is by Gary Keller, and he talks about how focusing on one thing is the way to succeed. And I recently made a video on how focusing on one thing ruined my life. So I'm gonna say this is good for some people, but not for everyone. The reason focusing on one thing doesn't work, and this is why I think it's maybe good for some people, because for me personally, I need to stay interested in what I'm doing. And in the past, when I've focused on one thing, whether it's like one business and just growing that thing, what ends up happening is you maybe don't want to do it anymore. Okay, so that's how it starts. You don't want to do it anymore when you continue, but you push through because you're supposed to be doing the one thing, right? That's how you grow. So you push through, and then eventually you start just hating it, and then despising the thing, and then completely resenting that thing until you never want to do it again. And that's kind of the downside to the one thing. Let's go on to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. This is a must read, in my opinion. So this is a true story about Viktor Frankl, about his time in a Nazi concentration camp, and how he believes the only reason he was able to survive is because of his mindset, his will, the power of his mind, and what he believed to be true. Take control of the one thing that he had control over, because everything else was taken away from him, and that was his mind and how he felt about everything. Atomic Habits. Okay, this is like the most popular self-development book out there right now at the moment. I feel like a lot of these books have had their time in the sun in the self-development world over the last 10 years, where they've become like the most popular. This is the current most popular habit book, and this is where I'm gonna put it. It's fine, but there are so many habit building books. This is the latest one. The reason I don't think it's as good as some other ones, and again, this is going to depend on who you are as a person. It's like an IKEA catalog where it's just straight up instructions on how to develop a habit, like a step-by-step process of how to develop a habit. And while the process is tried and true, it works for so many people, the book's a little mechanical in that way. I don't think it's that enjoyable of a read, but if you've never heard these concepts before, then it could be a life-changing book for you. However, I'm going to go ahead and skip to this. And again, this depends on the person you're talking about. If you want that just instruction manual type book on how to build a habit, read Atomic Habits. If you want a book that goes over the same concepts, but also tells them in story format and is a more enjoyable book to read, The Power of Habit is a better book, in my opinion. The Power of Habit, on the other hand, he talks about the same pretty much process process of how to build a habit, but he also gives real life examples, lots of real life examples of like people that have followed this that have gone from like nothing to a lot, like becoming something amazing. And it's a little, I think there's some of that in Atomic Habits as well, but this book does it better in my opinion. So if you're learning to build a habit and you want an enjoyable read, I would say The Power of Habit. Secrets of a Millionaire Mind. Secrets of a Millionaire Mind, again, is a life-changing book in my opinion. Out of all the How to Be a Millionaire books that are out there, this is the best one, the one that stuck out most to me. T. Harv Eker tells you the things that you don't want to hear, but you need to hear. Like if you're struggling financially or mentally, it's a big mindset book. A few things that stuck out to me in this book, things that I still use to this day. One is how to organize your finances. And literally, like one of my most popular videos on this channel, which this video will be going on, is about paying yourself first. And I talk about this T. Harv Eker method of how to divide your money. And then the other thing in this book is about the reason you're not doing the thing you want to do in your life is because of you're treating yourself as a victim. One of the key things that stuck out to me was these things that he calls victim clues. And it's if you find yourself, or anybody for that matter, blaming, complaining, or justifying their current situation or something they're unhappy with in their life, they're treating themselves as a victim and they're ultimately taking the control out of their hands and putting it into somebody else's hands or some other situation's hands that they can't control. Alchemist. I wouldn't say it's a must read, although I really enjoyed this book. It's a fictional novel. It's actually not really a self-development book, but it's put in the self-development category a lot. It's a fictional novel about this kid that starts out with nothing and he like lives in the middle of nowhere and he goes on a life adventure in search for like these life's riches, as you will. And he has this idea of going across the country or multiple countries, I don't really remember, but he traveled a long way to go and do this thing. And along the way, he meets and encounters so many different people and ends up learning a lot about finances and mindset. And he ends up taking these random jobs. And it's just his life journey about him learning things as he's traveling. And it's a really good fictional book. I think it's good for some people if you enjoy stories. So yeah, that's The Alchemist. Okay, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This is very controversial. At least, well, I don't know if the book's controversial, but Robert Kiyosaki, the guy who wrote the book, is very controversial. A lot of people don't really agree with him on a lot of things, but this book is life-changing. Don't let it fool you. This is the first book I read it in 2009. It's the first like entrepreneurship type book I've ever read, and it set me on this path of like becoming an entrepreneur, owning my own businesses, doing all these own business things. Actually, it's right here. I bought this copy in 2009. Profit First. This book is good for some people. I really enjoyed it personally. I read it at the right time, but it's essentially a business book for business owners, I believe, that talks about how you should always work in your profit first, essentially. How a lot of people operate their business and how we were operating our business before reading this book. We had a real estate photography company. We would charge this much, subtract how much we needed to pay the photographers, how much we needed to pay the editors, how much overhead it cost us, all the equipment, like cameras, the tripods, the computers. We would calculate all this stuff, the scheduler, what we would pay them, all the services we were paying for. We would calculate all that stuff, and then whatever was left over would be our profit. And it seemed like it was a smart way of doing things. But after reading this book, he says, no, calculate your profit first. Figure out how much you want to make. So instead, calculate, okay, I'm going to charge this much and I'm going to make this much. So say like, I'm going to charge $200 and I'm going to keep 50 of it. And then everything else is added. So no matter what you're getting paid first, that's inevitable. You're not just going to get what's left over. And a lot of small business owners pay everyone else first and then they get what's left over. And this book kind of teaches you how to reverse that that and put your profit first. Okay, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. So this is another one that everyone talks about. He's this hardcore, I think he's a Marine or something, but he talks about how he went through shit in his life and now he won't tolerate anything else. He just gets shit done no matter what. And while this, I believe, is good for some people, in my opinion, it wasn't that great for me. Now, he's one of the same reasons why I don't really care for the whole hustle culture and hustle mentality. Even when that was a big popular thing, people are starting to kind of realize it now that it's not really a good way to live. At the time, everyone was talking about that. And even at the time, like Gary Vee and stuff, he would push this hustle mentality. And I'm like, damn, I don't want to just work all the time and drive myself into the ground, just working and working and working. And both these guys, David Goggins and Gary Vee, they have this mentality of like, oh, you have to outwork the next guy because they're gonna outwork you if you don't. And you know, there's always someone competing against you and you have to just outwork them. And it's about this hustle, hustle, hustle. There's a few other books. Deep Work by Cal Newport, I'll rank that one next, is another one where he talks about, and actually Tim Ferriss as well, this one. I'm gonna rank these two books next. These guys have become ultra successful doing the exact opposite of this hustle, you know, get things done no matter what type mentality. What they do, Deep Work, I'll put in a must read. Cal Newport, he talks about how what he does is when he works, he gets rid of all distractions, turns off everything, closes himself off. And actually, fun fact about this, both Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, who are actually really good friends, talk about how this is the reason they believe they're very successful, is their ability to deep work. They don't use deep work, that's what he calls it, but it's focus. Like, he turns off everything and isolates himself completely and focuses on specific tasks that move the needle forward, dedicating a few hours each day solely on the one task that actually matters. So 4-Hour Workweek. He started off writing this book, I think it was like in 2007 or something he wrote this book, The 4-Hour Workweek. And this book is about how he was able, when he started his supplement company, he was able to get it to a point where he was only working 4 hours a week. The book is about working efficiently and outsourcing any work that you want to get done. So in 2008, at the time this book came out, this was a very fascinating concept. Like, not a lot of people were doing this. Now, this is why I kind of moved it down, because a lot of people understand and know the power of using virtual assistants and outsourcing your work to other people and having systems and processes in place to do the work for you, especially now with like AI coming out, that you could do so much with that stuff. But in 2008, almost virtually no one was doing this type of stuff. And him hiring virtual assistants, people in other countries, do some menial tasks for him was a mind-blowing concept. No one even heard of it in 2008. He hired so many virtual assistants that he ended up not having to work so much on his supplement company that was making him, you know, a couple $100,000 a month. Okay, The Compound Effect is a must-read book. You probably can guess from the title what it's about, but success in something is not one huge event that happens in your life. It's about small things you do every single day that compound to something great. Okay, so the example I like to give for this, if you're at lunch one day and you have a choice between eating a salad or a hamburger and you choose the hamburger, does that make you an unhealthy person? Well, no it doesn't, because it's just a hamburger. It's like one time, whatever, you know. But what if you choose the hamburger over the salad every day for years? Does that make you an unhealthy person? Yes, it does make you an unhealthy person if you choose that over the salad every single time. F you money. I'm a Dan Lok fan, and I think this is a must read in my opinion. What F you money is essentially when you become a millionaire. He calls that his FU money, where once you make like, millions of dollars, it doesn't have to be millions of dollars, but a large amount of money, when you get to that point, that's called your FU money. You can essentially, it gives you the freedom to do whatever you want and say FU to anything else that you don't want to do. Okay, The Magic of Thinking Big. I also think this is a must read. This is a concept you wouldn't think is that big of a deal, but it actually is a big deal. The Magic of Thinking Big talks about how make your goal so much larger than what you're trying to accomplish. And it's one of those things where it's like, if you do that, the little thing that you're actually fine with, you'll probably greatly surpass it, even if you don't reach the big goal that you're trying to think of. The things that you thought about doing to make $1,000 a day versus the things you thought about doing to make $20,000 a day are different. And The Magic of Thinking Big talks a lot about that, where if you make your goals too small, the action you take is going to be a lot less. It's not necessarily about achieving a big goal. It's about completely ending up in a much better position than you wanted to be in the first place. So, Awaken the Giant Within. Tony Robbins is a big mindset guy. Here's something about Tony Robbins. I've never heard anyone say this about him, but one of the reasons I really like him personally is because when you're looking, I'll go to the main camera for this. When you're looking for self-developed, self-improvement information, but you want to avoid the shiny object syndrome, which is actually more difficult than you might think. The shiny object syndrome being when you're focused on doing or accomplishing one activity. A lot of these other self-development people have grown or talk about specific industries or specific projects. And what happens with the shiny object syndrome is when you read these books and really start to believe in what these people do, I'm not saying they're bad ideas, but you're focused on something and then all of a sudden you think their idea is better. You quit what you're doing and then move on to something else. You never do the compound effect of continue to work on that thing because you heard another idea that you think is better. To avoid that and continue to take in self-development, read Tony Robbins. That's what I like about him. Because he coaches so many different people in so many different industries, all the advice, all the mindset stuff, all the psychology stuff, all the money stuff that he talks about applies to anyone doing anything. And he never pushes, you should do real estate. You should do YouTube. You should do running to get fit. Like, there's no best idea. Do the idea that's right for you. Continue to do the thing that you want to do. And he just talks about how to apply and how to continue to do those things. And I really like that about him. I'm going to go ahead and put Unlimited Power in here as well. That's his first book. Both of these are game-changing, life-changing, like psychological books that really shift your mindset into believing you can do something great and teaches you ways and techniques to like do those great things. And they get you extremely motivated to do those things. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I put Unlimited Power in here. That's what I did. Okay, let's move on to Mindset by Carol Dweck. This is a must read, I think. So one of the core concepts, the key concepts to this book is Carol Dweck talks about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, and how a fixed mindset is someone who believes that where they're at now is just determined. That's who they are. They can't get any farther. A growth mindset is someone who believes that they can get farther in life or farther in that thing. And this book helped me and will help anyone who reads it realize that you surprisingly might have a fixed mindset on certain things that you didn't think you had fixed mindsets on. Okay, The Millionaire Fastlane. The Millionaire Fastlane, it's fine. It's another book like The Secrets of a Millionaire Mind. It's good. I just don't like this guy's style as much, but it essentially teaches you all the habits of a multimillionaire. And that's all I'm gonna say about it. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a... This is another book that was ultra popular a few years back when it came out. I think it's fine, but there are better books on the subject. This is another one of those like Gary V type people where he's very like, and David Goggins, where he's just like, do the thing. And I don't know, it was nice. It was kind of basic information, I thought. I mean, the thing is, these books, David Goggins and The Subtle Art of Not Giving and Atomic Habits and The Millionaire Fastlane, the only reason I believe they get such praise is because they're often the first, because they're so popular, they're often the first self-development book that people read, and they're the life-changing ones for them. So they're not bad, but there's better books on these subjects I just think these are the most popular, and a lot of people like them because it's their first introduction to this type of thing, so they're very impactful to them. The Untethered Soul is actually a meditation book. It's really interesting. It talks about how the concept of is like, who are we? Who are you? If you were to ask yourself that question, because you're not your name, you're not who you think you are, you're not, the thing you're doing. All you are is the observer. You're not even the things you think about, because where do those thoughts come from? Anyway, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This is such a classic. This is the same book that's like in the dental office of your dentist that's been on the bookshelf while in the waiting room for like 10-20 years or something, and it's like all beat up and has dust on it and stuff, and it's good. I guess you should read it. It's a must read because it is a classic. It's a good base of habits that you should build, and it is a classic book, but it's a classic book for a reason. Like, if you're gonna read self-development books, you should read all the classics, in my opinion. The reason it's not life-changing is because, like I said, I think there's other books that do talk about this stuff. But this one, it's so concise in like what it's trying to teach you. It's great. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Another one on like the must-read. And actually, in this particular case, I don't think other books, at least I've never read a book that have talked about this subject better. It's just a good book on how you should be acting and how you should be treating other people. I really don't think there is a book that does it better. And I think this book was written in like 1950 or something. Like, it's a super old book. It's October 1936. Dang, bro. Classic. Jack Canfield, The Success Principles was the last one I did. Great book. Highly recommend. It's a beefy read though. But it was life-changing for me. Like, literally, it's 67, I believe it's 67. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's like 67 principles of success on how to be successful in life. And every single one is a pretty good principle. So I'd recommend it. It's just like, let me adjust this, not unplug it. Principles to live by in life. Okay, so these are Tony Robbins' money books. And these are his like psychology, self-development type books, and they're great. His money books, I also think they're life-changing. I'm going to say this one's good for some people. This one's a must-read. Tony Robbins, in this book, he interviews like 100+ billionaires, basically, personally, that he knows. He's ultra successful himself. I think he might actually be a billionaire. But he goes out and interviews like 100+ billionaires, which is crazy because there's not actually that many billionaires in the world, and asks them like their most important pieces of advice about like money and stuff like that. And so that's what this book is. And it's good for some people, but the reason I wouldn't put it any higher is because a lot of the advice is for like ultra successful people. However, this book, Unshakable, is his newest one. This book is super big, this money book. This book is this book, but it's like a fourth of the size. This is like his, okay, these are just the key points that I believe everyone can hear, or all the key points from this book that can apply to anyone, like everyone should take. And I believe that's life-changing because this is like a shorter book with like the most impactful things that could apply to everyone's life. But if you're interested in what all the billionaires and stuff that he interviewed said, this is a good book. Ray Dalio, Principles. I would say this is good for some people. Ray Dalio is one of the most, actually he's friends with Tony Robbins as well. He's one of the most successful investors in the world, right up there with Warren Buffett. Arguably more successful, just less well known. It's investing advice. It's a good book, but not everybody wants to do that stuff. But if you're gonna want to invest, read this book. The Go-Giver instead of the Go-Getter. The book is about basically making everything a win-win. It's not about just giving. People always talk about how giving is better than taking. Receiving. Giving is better than receiving. But he talks about how that's not true. It makes you feel good to give, right? But you can't give without someone receiving. It's like a yin and yang. So you shouldn't feel bad about receiving gifts. Okay, Jen Sincero, you are a badass. and you are a badass at making money. You are a badass and you are a badass at making money. Go way above all the she is. You Are a Badass's self-development book, and then You Are a Badass at Making Money is a financial book. Basically, like a you can do it type book, and she tells her story and all this stuff. But she's like a comedian. She is really funny. It is, out of all these self-development books here on this list, it is like one of the most entertaining books to read. And like, if anyone wants to start or get into the self-development space, whether it's just self-development or whether they want to make more money, these tend to be the first books I recommend, only because they're so fun to read and they're so easy to get through. I love it. Okay, this is the oldest book on the list, I think. Unless Think and Grow Rich. Think and Grow Rich is pretty old, but I don't think it's this old. This book was, Science of Getting Rich was written in 1910, bro. This book was written in 1910. 10! That's 113 years ago. 113 years old, this book. The Science of Getting Rich. And you know what? The stuff he talks about how to get rich in this book from 113 years ago is the same thing today. Obviously not the strategies, but it's mindset, man. Mindset is everything. Mindset is everything in your life. Think and Grow Rich. Another one. I think it's a classic. I honestly kind of think it's a must read, but I'm just going to go ahead and put it for some people because, again, not everyone is looking to like pursue. It's a very interesting, well-written book, I think, and that's why it's kind of a classic. It's kind of the same thing as The Science of Getting Rich in that it teaches you the mindset of how to become rich through stories. The secret genius of this book, Think and Grow Rich, is that at the beginning of the book, he makes it sound like there's one single secret to achieving like all your dreams and stuff, but you're gonna have to discover it. It's buried in this book, and you're gonna have to discover it through all these stories for yourself. That way it's more impactful for you, which is true. However, this book is filled with a shitload of stories from a shitload of different people. He went around and interviewed some of the most wealthy people in the day, like it took him like 20 years or something to write this book. He interviewed hundreds of some of the most wealthy and successful people in the world, not just rich, but like rich and happy and fit and have a great relationship. Like everything in their life is going amazing. He went out and interviewed these people and studied and learned a lot about them. And he says that, okay, there's one single secret, all this stuff, but this book is filled with a bunch of different stories from a bunch of these ultra successful people. And the reason he wrote it this way is because there's not one single secret of getting rich. There's different concepts that you need to hear at different points in your life. And so depending on what you're struggling with in that moment, you'll get from one of these specific stories. So there's a bunch of different ideas told through story form in this book. The aha moment is different for different people at different times. Like you can go back and read this book and take something completely different from it if you read it, again, a second time 5 years later or something. The 4 Agreements. Okay, this book is very controversial to me because for me personally, I would put it in bad. But I'm going to go ahead and put good for some people because I have seen firsthand people that have read this book that needed to hear the message. It's a good book. I think some people really need to hear this message. But if you've read a few of these other books, this one's not that impactful. If you haven't read a lot of these books, then maybe you should read this one. The Slight Edge is like the same book as this, The Compound Effect. They're both really good. The Slight Edge is essentially about doing small tasks each day to accomplish your goal. How success in any particular field is not determined based on one big event, but determined by you doing a small action each day towards accomplishing that thing. Thank you so much for watching. See you next video.